Hola amigos de las Perlas del Mar, pues nos encontramos aquí en el HotDocs 2011. Les contamos que este festival ya está llegando a su final lamentablemente y pues esperamos que toda nuestra audiencia haya tenido la oportunidad de visitar nuestro website y estar más enterados respecto a lo que pasó durante estos 11 días. Aún tenemos 2 entrevistas más. Hoy vamos a realizar una entrevista con el director de WeWere, un film que habla sobre la problemática en los 80 sobre el VIH-Sida y pues muchos problemas más que ocurrieron en esta época, sobre todo el desplazamiento de mucha comunidad LGBT a San Francisco durante esta crisis tan grande que se dio con lo que se conocía como el cáncer gay. Quédense con mayor información y recuerden que también les tendremos en exclusiva la entrevista con el director Jaime Carrillo de Little Voices, un film colombiano que estamos muy contentos de que se presente aquí en este festival. Y pues bueno, también queremos agradecer muy especialmente a las personas de KB Kelly que nos ha ayudado durante todo este tiempo del festival y a toda nuestra audiencia por estar en contacto aquí con las Perlas del Mar. No se muevan, esperen mayor información en este HotDocs 2011. Chao.
If you had a bus ticket, it better be saying San Francisco, because that was the place to come.
I think a lot of us came out here because we didn't quite fit where we were.
I like the people here, they just seem more open. And I always wanted to meet a nice blonde surfer.
If you took a bunch of young men and said, have as much sex as you can have, how much sex would they have? A lot of sex. All of America was feeling very confident that you could be much more sexual, and that was okay.
'81 was a big year. That is when everything changed. I remember looking in the window of Star Pharmacy, and there were these little Polaroid photographs. Watch out, guys, there's something out there.
The first time I heard about AIDS, I think it was called the gay cancer. We had friends who were dying right at the beginning of the epidemic.
I was hanging blood one day in the hospital, and the infectious disease fellow came in and said, Eileen, why don't you put gloves on? We don't know what this is.
How are you getting it? Who are you getting it from? Who's giving it to who?
Everybody was reading the obituaries because they went from like this to like this.
Our principal response was food banks and care programs, and it was a response that America should be proud of.
It changed people's view of the gay community in a huge way.
Again and again, in every situation, there's lesbians there leading the fight.
None of my friends are around from the beginning, so I want to tell their story as much as I want to tell my story.
Today we are here with David Weissman. He's a producer and director of this fantastic film, and he takes us back in time and he let us know more about this crisis and what happened during the early 80s. So we were here. Were you there?
Yes, I moved to San Francisco in the late 1970s, before Harvey Milk was elected, and I was there when he was assassinated, and then I was there all through the years of the AIDS epidemic, of the dark years. Certainly it's still going on.
Okay, if you could describe San Francisco as a person, how would it be and what would be the attributes after the crisis?
Of the city itself?
Yes, the whole environment and people.
Well, I mean, it's a city it has a long tradition of being very politically progressive and countercultural, and a place where people moved to get away from the world that felt oppressive to them wherever they were. So I think that the way the city responded in the situation of the AIDS epidemic really reflected that tradition, and I think that it's still very much part of the essence of what San Francisco is, although it's obviously become a much more expensive city than it was before.
So how long took you to create the whole concept, the treatment of it?
Well, the whole film, from conception to completion, was just about 2 years, so it was pretty quick. The interviewees were all people who I it was very natural, the process. I mean, I didn't seek them out. Most of them were people who I ran into, who I knew a little bit, and in the course of conversation it occurred to me that they would be good interviewees for the film. So it was a very organic process of choosing my interviewees.
So what was the necessity of creating this film?
Well, I have Holocaust history in my family, and so even during the epidemic I was aware that there would come a time at which the community itself would need to process its own grief and to acknowledge its own history, and that there would be questions from subsequent generations about what had happened in an era that is in the past, at least the worst part of it. So it just seemed like the right time. The idea was suggested to me by a boyfriend who was much younger than me, and he had heard me talk about my experiences there a lot, and so when he suggested the idea, I thought, yeah, it's important that this story be told, and it should be told by someone who lived through it.
So what was the reaction of the audience, like the first time when the community saw it?
Well, it's played, the first screening was actually in Portland, but wasn't quite finished yet, and then we had a screening in San Francisco, and that was very powerful, because it played in the Castro Theater, which is really the heart of the gay neighborhood. So there were many people in the audience who had survived those years, and it was very emotionally powerful. We got like a 10-minute standing ovation and lots of tears, but not just, I think the movie is very validating for the generation that lived through it, because it's never really been spoken in the way that this film does, to really address the enormity of that history.
So in one part of the film, you're talking about the support of women, of the lesbians. How was the support of the lesbian community and how important it was?
Well, you have to remember that in the 1970s, it was really the blossoming of the women's movement, and there were many, many lesbians who were separatists, who had no relationship with men at all, and kept a very kind of distinct political identity that was very separate from the gay movement. And on the other side, there were many gay men who were not very politically conscious around feminism, and there was a lot of misogyny in the gay male community. So there was a lot of separation, not complete, because obviously there were plenty of people who had, gay male friends and lesbian friends, but there was a degree of separation coming from both sides. And there was a lot of women who were in healthcare, a lot of lesbians particularly who worked in healthcare. And then as the epidemic started and people started to get sick, it just, in many ways lesbians really came forward to take care of their gay brothers in that period. And I think it was not only was it a time of healing and relationship building, but it was also a great political breakthrough, because it enabled us to be more of a unified community with a unified purpose.
So in the early 70s, you moved to San Francisco. I was reading the synopsis and it says, filmmaker and activist. Would you consider yourself 30 years after an activist still?
Yeah, I think politics motivates almost everything I do on some level. I mean, I feel like I live in the world as someone who tries to make it a better place, whether it's through direct political activism or just through trying to be as good of a human being as I can be. My films have always been somewhat provocative and not necessarily political in any overt way. But I feel, yes, I would still consider myself an activist. My name is David Weissman, and my documentary WeWere Here is playing at Inside Out Festival on the 23rd of May at TIFF at 7 p.m. So I hope you get a chance to see it.